And we are live. Well, hello everybody, and thanks so much for joining us for the Christchurch Mayoral debate. And joining me this evening, Phil Mauger and Sara Templeton are with me. Hello to you both.
G'day,
Kia
how
ora,
you doing?
Chris.
Kia ora. Let's get straight into it, shall we? Phil, let's start with you. So first of all, Phil, in 2022, you promised to keep rate increases below 4.5%, yet the actual rise, which I guess in some respects was much higher than that. Why should ratepayers trust you in this election?
I've learned a lot since then, Chris. One of the things that I didn't realise how much our interest payments on our debt was, and also other things like we're $40 million for our insurance premiums. This cost of living crisis is affecting us as much as it is everyone out there. So it was, I shouldn't have probably said that down there, but rest assured it's looking to keep it as low as affordably can.
Can you give me a figure for this time round then?
No, well, this time round, well, at the moment we're 6.6, but we actually started off in the mid nines, and we got it down to 6.6, which if you take the stadium off, which some people do, it down to 5. I'd like to think it's somewhere in that order. I won't put a number on it ever again.
Okay. Sara, you have opposed a rates caps because it cancels the communities. You've said this ability to influence decisions being made at council. What do you say to communities who already themselves are calling for a rates cap? Isn't that also about cancelling their influence?
I think the key thing is that we need to make sure that we've got an affordable city, not just cheap rates. So across the country, rates have been unsustainably high, and that's off the back of some of the things that Phil said about interest and inflation, but also because we've been kicking the can down the road on our infrastructure for so long that we've got massive repairs and a big backlog to catch up on. But rates caps really do limit the ability for our communities to influence what council can spend their money on. And we also have parts of the city, parts of the city are doing really well. Lots of suburbs are doing well, but areas out east are not. And if a rates cap goes in place, that's going to limit our ability to do the things that we need to do to make sure that east is brought up to the rest of the city.
But what do you say to people on the east that might actually say, well, a rates cap would be great because the cost of living is so expensive?
Yeah, it's true. The cost of living is really tough, but things that council does make a difference to your everyday cost of living as well. So one of the things that happens with a rates cap, and we've seen it in overseas countries as well, is that it puts enormous pressure on councils to raise revenue through other methods. Things like raising library fees, pool fees, car parking charges, all of those things that offset rates end up increasing the cost of living in the city in the meantime. It also puts pressure on council to sell assets and to increase debt. And that's something that we don't want as well.
Well, that's a good point you raise, because do you have any concrete evidence that you can point to that suggests or proves a rate cap would automatically drive up charges at council facilities, as you claim?
It's happened overseas. And so there's been a lot of work happening through Local Government New Zealand, conversations that have been happening with councils overseas in Australia to look at their experience and what's actually happened on the ground when councils are faced with an artificial rates cap.
Phil, that a fair point?
No, I don't think so. The way I look at it is, if the government have said, if they're thinking about a rates cap, let's not keep our head in the sand. It is more than likely going to happen. So if we're knocking around 5 or 6%, somewhere in that order, we're already there, in my view, compared to other places like our neighbours, 12, 13% down south, even more. We're close to what the government could put on us. We don't know what it is, but the line in the sand is going to be, government is suggesting that if it's for infrastructure, the rates, you can not charge what you like, but the rates are going to be what the rates. It's what they're going to call the nice to haves. Now, someone's nice to have is another person's got to have it at all costs. That's going to be the line that's going to be very hard to distinguish, and we'd have to go for consultation for it, of course. But that's going to be the hard bit to digest.
But isn't there?
But the reality is,
go ahead, Sara.
The reality is we're actually nowhere near close to that 5%. We might be 6.6% this year, but that's because we've artificially pushed things out into next year, and next year is looking at 10.5%. So that's 5.5% we would need to find. Around 2% of that is probably stuff that's not deliverable. But, that's a big chunk we would need to find and a long way from the 5% that's being talked about. So that would mean increasing revenue, capping a range of product, services and projects that we do that our community is really relying on to keep us moving forward.
Phil,
You're
you
right.
say that Phil, you say
Sorry?
that we better get ready because if the government's serious about saying something, they will. But what's stopping you from saying, actually, no, we don't want to get ready. This is how we're going to do it as a city.
Well, we've got to look. We're all in a cost of living crisis, like I said, and council's no exception. We've got $2 billion on the hook, and 25% of every rate dollar, 25 cents of every rate dollar we collect goes into debt servicing. So we always tend to over capitalise our rates. We say we're going to do this, but we don't. We're always got a little bit, we underspend. The other thing that we just come to finance and performance the other day, for some reason, and God knows how it happened, we were actually getting a bit less on our insurance premiums next year. So that's going to make a little bit of difference, quite a bit of difference actually. And I didn't say to you the other day when I was talking to someone, I talk to people in the lift at work, and they say, these are people that I used to work with when I was doing contracting and stuff like that, because I still see them from time to time. And they say, oh, we think we could actually save some money doing this. And these are the guys that are the coalface at the council. So we need to listen to those people who are right there, working on the plans or whatever they're doing, and saying, we think we could save a few bob here. And we need to talk to those people.
Well, let's talk to Sarah about that. Sarah, do you have any views on what the council could save, cut, whatever, to save money for ratepayers? Because they'll be looking to you if you become the next mayor to say, what can you do for me to help keep my rates under control?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I've always been really good at that systems and processes kind of stuff, and actually looking at the nitty-gritty within the organisation is something that I'd be really keen to do, and something where I could lead a long-term plan process, our 10-year budget, that actually does that. So we didn't do that this term, and that's made a difference to our ability to look closely at what's happening. So our communities recognise that rates are something that we need to pay, because we all have a benefit from that shared infrastructure that we have. But what residents really hate is when that money is wasted, when they see something happening and then it being repeated, a road gets done and then waterworks happen a couple of years later, and they don't like that at all. So making sure we've got the right systems in place and that we've got the right oversight, so that we can prioritise projects is really important.
Do you have any ideas of what we could save, though? I mean, you must have something that you thought, maybe that's a bit too much.
Yeah, in the long-term plan, there was a proposal to spend $5 million of ratepayers' money on going towards an aircraft hangar out at the National Air Force Museum. And, they're an amazing organisation that do a whole pile of really good stuff, and a lot of tourists go and visit them. But in between the consultation that we did and then the final decision, the government announced an extra $12 billion worth of funding for the Defence Force. And so I thought that we shouldn't be spending $5 million of ratepayers' money on an aircraft hangar for an old aeroplane, when that's something that the Defence Force should be spending.
Okay, Phil, that's what Sarah said. What do you say?
One thing I might say there, and as Sarah said, it is a lot of money, but we've got to remember that the Air Force Museum is totally paid for and run by the Air Force. We don't spend a cent on it, and the number of people it attracts into the city is a lot. And we, Venues Otatahi, run the food service out there, and there's balls and conferences and stuff there. So it's a valuable part of what the city is. And I think most of the other councillors, when we voted on it, thought, well, $5 million is a small price to pay towards how much benefit we have had over the years from the Air Force Museum. And I think that's how it sort of got to where it was.
But $5 million is a lot of money when it comes to doing things like addressing homelessness, for example. Those kind of things that actually are probably more core to council than something that's run by an external organisation.
Sarah, let's move on to some other issues, I suppose you could say. You've criticised Phil for being part of, quote, an old boys club when he has the ability to call ministers directly. But some would argue, though, isn't that exactly what the mayor should be doing, building relationships with central government? What's your response to that?
Yeah, so the mayor's role is absolutely to help the council build relationships with central government. The problem when it's just a relationship just between the mayor and just one minister is that, for example, ministers change frequently, governments change, councils change. The strategic thing to do is to make sure that council and the government have a really good working relationship, and that we have an ongoing relationship, not just at the whim of a single phone call. The phone call that where Phil said that we didn't need as much sort of sustainable and active transport funding, that wasn't something that was mandated by the rest of council. We had specifically passed a resolution as a council asking for $78 million for public transport. It wasn't for one person, even if they have the role of mayor, to go against that council decision, and that money then disappeared. It never went to Hawke's Bay. In fact, we were given that money a month after Cyclone Gabrielle, and the mayor was happy to accept it at the time.
Phil, what is your response to that?
It's misinformation. I remember sitting down with the minister at the time, the Labor minister at the time, and stood next to him, and he said about $78 million. Then the new government came in, and it didn't take a rocket scientist to realise that $78 million was going to vanish. I know it was probably still sitting in Treasury, because Sarah said she did a Lagoima or OIA and see where the money was. But you got to remember that we got $17 billion given or put on us by the government after the earthquake, and we spent that wisely. When the new government got in, I rang Simeon Brown and I said, "You're the new transport minister." And I said, "We've got a lovely motorway north and a lovely motorway south, and all of this infrastructure that we've been fixed, land that we've been given for the stadium, and $220 million from another government towards the stadium. We have done pretty good here." And I thought, here we go. These poor people up in Napier haven't even got a road to drive down. So I thought it might be a nice gesture to say, look, if you want to back off for a bit, the 78 million didn't come into it. It was I said, just back off on if you wanted to give money to them and not to us. It doesn't worry me. And since then, through these relationships with what we call the Old Boys Club, the council has managed to get $275 million extra for roading in Christchurch, on top of what we already get anyway. So I just felt it was the right thing to do, because they were in far desperate more need than us at that particular time.
Okay, Sarah, what's your response?
I guess it's mixed. So, I mean, the Labor government had already promised to do the Brougham Street upgrade. So the fact that we got money for that from the national government was only because the national government took it away to start with. And so that's not real funding. Pages Road Bridge, a really, really important lifeline project, something that staff have worked really, really hard to make sure that we've got a really good business case for. The reality is a government minister isn't legally allowed to interfere with the individual decisions that the Waka Kotahi board make. So either it's the Old Boys Club at stake, in networking and things, or it was just that really good staff business case that was put forward. And I've talked to staff. I know how hard they worked, not just to get the bridge itself, but all of the approaches as well, to make sure that people can evacuate in an emergency.
Okay, let's move on to polls. There hasn't been many polls about popularity. I don't think there's probably many coming out recently, but there was one poll, Phil, that said I think it was a taxpayer poll, and to be fair, they are right-wing. That poll suggested you were New Zealand's most popular metropolitan mayor. Do you believe you deserve that title?
I always try and fly under the radar and don't sell myself that hard, but the amount of effort that we've put in, I think so. There's only 3 metros in the country, so there's only 3 to go by. Down the road at Waimak, Dan Gordon is the number 1 mayor of everyone else. So I was very happy to see that, because I have been putting a lot of work in to pump sunshine into Christchurch, because I think it's the best place out, and we've got so many good things happening here. So maybe that's why. But went up a lot from what we were last time.
Sarah, why do you think Phil was awarded that title?
He's a likable kind of guy, right? And there's nothing gone seriously wrong this term. And Phil gets the benefit of a city that is vibing now. The central city's humming, people are really enjoying coming into town, and that's off the back of a whole pile of decisions that were made by previous governments and previous councils that are really coming into fruition now. And there's no doubt that the sitting mayor at this time is going to be doing well off the back of that.
You say that nothing really has gone wrong in this current administration, so therefore why should voters change direction and vote for you?
because I'm the one who wants to keep us going in the same direction that we have now. It's no surprise to anyone that Phil and his supporters have been saying Phil just needs one more vote to change it. So if everything's going really well, if the city's humming, why would you want to change that? The reality is that Phil is in favour of rates capping. He's in favour of doing things like, shorter hours in our libraries and pools. He's put forward a proposal, this is stuff that you said that was quoted in the press when you announced, it was part of your press release, things that you are planning to do to reduce rates, like collecting less rubbish, deferring the upgrades of our waste transfer stations, stop buying land for more stormwater basins to protect homes from flooding. All of those things are core council, and I don't want that to happen, and that's why I'm standing for mayor.
Phil, your response?
Because we've got so much borrowed money, lots, and I don't blame anyone for it. After the earthquake, we spent the money, and everything we've got is very good, and that's another reason why people are coming down to Christchurch. But we've got to get our debt under control. If we can stop spending on some things, or just push them out another couple of years if it's not totally necessary. Well, a couple of years when I first got in, I didn't know what an annual plan was from a back end of a truck when I first got in. And one of the things we did at the time, we put, first time I'd ever seen it, we put piece of paper on the wall, and they said, right, if you want to get the rates down to X, you've got to get down to this line. And we put lines through things and stuff like that, and we got down to X. I would like to see us go forward in the new term and say, right, we know that we've got to have these things, but let's just not do them yet. All the important things like the sewer down Waireki Road, the sewer in Maidstone Road, Creek Road, they have got to be done because that's building up resilience and sizing with the intensifications
But
going in. And I've seen... sorry
to interrupt, but isn't that the point that Sarah makes, and that is that what you're talking about here is essentially, quote unquote, kicking the can, or isn't that the expression you use, Sarah, kicking the can down the road, when these things could be done now, because they will have to be done at some stage. Why not fix them now and worry about other stuff later?
Yeah. Now, as far as fixing things goes, you've got to fix the stuff that needs fixing, like water mains. We're fixing water mains. We're fixing water leaks. We're replacing water mains. As I say, we got $17 billion given to us after the earthquakes, and we've spent that very wisely.
It's not $17 billion.
$17 billion got given to us by the government after the earthquake.
No, it didn't. So $17 billion was the estimated total cost of the rebuild after the earthquake. That includes the city council and ratepayer contribution. It includes the private insurance. Yes, government put in a stack of money, which they're bound to do by legislation to help us through that phase. But actually, that $17 billion includes Christchurch ratepayers, and it includes private insurance.
Private insurance. I think you'll find that private insurance is on top of that, and it starts knocking out about $40 billion. That's right.
I looked it up yesterday.
But just getting back, we do have to fix. Like I've seen the quality of the pipe in Waireki Road. It is knackered. It really needs to be fixed. We can't not do that because that has to happen. There's other things that we don't need to. I know they have to happen, but we don't need to do them right now because we haven't got the money. And if we can back off for a while, you've got to be very careful you don't do it too much because you end up with an avalanche of rubbish coming down on you in later years. But and there's the argument if we don't do it now, it'll never be cheaper and it will be dearer in the future. But do we want to get rid of some debt, and then we're a bit better off? Because before the earthquake, we had no debt at all. It must have been like coming to holiday camp.
Sarah, is that a fair point that we want to get rid of at least some debt, though?
Yes and no. So we don't want to be increasing debt for things that aren't intergenerational. So the fact that we've got Te Kuru wetlands, that massive stormwater basin network that has really helped stop homes flooding along the Pawaho-Heskett River, that is debt funded, and it's a really big intergenerational play, and it's one that future generations should help fund because it benefits all of us, and that's why you have debt, so you can spread the costs out over a longer period of time. One thing I really worry about is the fact that to get debt down, there'll be a move to sell assets, and only 3 are currently being ring-fenced by the mayor, and what we need to do is make sure that we keep those other strategic assets as well.
Well, let's briefly touch on asset sales because there seems to be a lot of toing and froing here. Phil, asset sales on the cards for you at all, partial or strategically, or what have you?
I've said it a number of times. We get told about Alpine Fault 8, and I hope I'm not around when that happens, but they say it's coming. If that happens, Christchurch is going to be the centre of action for the whole of the South Island. We need to have control of our airport, maybe like to buy a bit more of the airport. Need to certainly have control of Orion, which is our electrical network, and we only need another 11%, and we've got 100% of that. And we certainly need to keep control of our port, total control, not downsell some of it and not lease out the operation of it. So I've said that a number of times. The other ones, like Eco Central and Eco Central City Care and Enable, I'll just leave that up to Christchurch City Holdings, who are doing an absolutely fantastic job compared to what was happening in previous years. It is running very, very well. And a bit of that is probably Sarah was there when we decided to do the strategic review. It decided not to go through, but we've got to just leave it up to CCHL for those ones. But the big three, the way I look at it, that you can't touch them because we are going to need them and we need control of them.
Sarah?
So there's a couple of things there. First, that Phil keeps talking about control. And while he said that, he's open to owning more of the airport and more of Orion, if he's against us increasing debt, I don't know how he'd do that, especially when the port have a plan for, an $800 million expansion. So without debt funding, there's no way that we would own the extra parts of Orion or the airport. But companies like Eco Central, it's our city's recycling centre. We own a company that does our recycling, and it does the recycling for other areas as well. It turns a small profit, and then that profit comes back into our communities. It's a monopoly. So what would happen if we sold Eco Central to a private enterprise? It's a monopoly. They could basically charge us what they want, which would mean it would cost us more to get our recycling done. And then those profits wouldn't come back into the city. They would go offshore somewhere. And that's just simply not good business sense. So it's really clear that the public want our businesses, our strategic assets, and decisions about them to be made in the best interests of our city, not just in the interests of other shareholders.
Phil, is that a fair point that we should be keeping our assets completely?
No. When we did the strategic review, and Sarah and Sam were both on the board at Christchurch City Holdings, and they both voted for it to come to council. Council decided not to, because, and to be fair, we're only going to go out for consultation, but we that's all it was, but it got voted down, and that didn't matter. But what has happened since then, everyone said at the time, no one wanted to give Christchurch City Holdings free rein to buy and sell everything. But what came through loud and clear, if a deal of the year comes up or whatever, or an opportunity to either buy some more, on a one-off things, we should always look at it as a council at the time if they bring it to us.
Okay. Nothing wrong with having a look then, is that what you're saying? At the time?
No, nothing wrong with having a look. You always got to have a look. Things change all the time, but those three especially, don't touch them because we need them.
Let's talk about leadership style now. Sarah, to you, how would you describe your leadership style compared to that of Phil's?
Yeah, I'm really collaborative. So I've worked in and with our communities for the last 15 years, from being Residents Association chair and working in with people in my local community to start a community garden or save our local volunteer library, through to chairing the community board for 3 years, and then on council chairing committees, chairing hearings panels. I'm not a rubber stamper, so I was involved in chairing the hearings panel on the decision for where the new Matatiki Hornby Centre would go. Staff had recommended Denton Park, and I chaired the hearings panel that really listened closely to the community, especially around the transport options there, and recommended to council that they not go ahead and that they choose a different site. So I work really collaboratively with others, which is why I've managed to get things across the line. Things like the Intergenerational Adaptation Fund. Not everyone was in support of that when it first went out for consultation in the long-term plan. But I worked really hard with the communities and with councillors to get that across the line, and that was really successful.
So collaboration. Phil, to you, how would you describe your leadership style?
I like relationships. At council, I say no councillor comes to work to do a bad job. Everyone wants to do the best for all of their. Some of them like to do best for their wards and stuff, and it's hard to try and bring them back to line to say we're here for the good of the city. Okay, but no councillor comes to council to do a bad job. My job is, or the mayor's job is to build relationships with those people and get everyone trying to get consensus where we can. And when I look at the way some other councils have run around the country, I think we've done a pretty good job. We all get on. If you've got a good relationship, you can fight like cat and dog, so to speak, in the meeting. But you always have a coffee or a beer afterwards and get on with it. Because if you've got a good relationship, everything will stack up behind it. So I'm great on wanting relationships.
Sarah, one question that came up in the emails a few times, and that was, you'll probably remember this, Storm McVeigh, quite feisty, a respected Christchurch lawyer, though. She delivered a deputation critical of the Park Terrace cycleway or temporary cycleway, whatever you call it. You left the meeting during her address. Do you believe leaving mid-presentation respects the duty of elected officials to hear dissenting views?
There was an issue with that meeting in that it wasn't chaired well. So I'm absolutely open to all views and opinions about the projects that we do. But what happened in there is that the deputation went beyond that. So she was accusing the council staff of corruption, all of those kind of things that are just not allowed under standing orders. And the mayor is supposed to be chairing the meeting in a way that protects staff. So we know that our staff have been subject to an enormous amount of abuse over the years, especially our transport staff and those who are working out in our community by our roads. And they face an enormous amount of abuse. And that's sometimes down to the fact that councillors or other elected members enable that when they bash our organisation, when they misinform the public about what's been happening. And the mayor's role is to champion the organisation and to make sure our staff are safe. That wasn't the case, and the mayor had tried to interrupt Ms McVeigh several times. She refused to stop. It was the mayor's job to stop that, and Phil admitted at the time he hadn't handled it well.
Phil, did you handle that well?
Probably in hindsight, no, but I've learnt a lot since then. It was quite an electric situation, and it got out of hand pretty quick. I should have apparently you stand up at a meeting and everything is supposed to calm down. I did not do that. I've learnt how to do that. Well, I've never done it, but I know that that's what's up my sleeve to if the rot sets in. So I've learned a lot. It was two people, one person in particular, giving their point of view across in a very strong manner, and some of the councillors took exception to that.
No, Sarah, it wasn't about her views on Park Terrace. It was about the staff and protecting the staff.
Sarah, obviously you advocate for more community involvement. How would you demonstrate that again if a similar contentious deputation arises in the future? Would you simply walk out, or would you reconsider things now?
No, well, I'd be chairing the meeting. And I think it's the chair's role. Yeah, that's it. I'll be chairing the meeting. It's the chair's role to then maybe have an adjournment and go and have a conversation with the person who's doing the deputation to outline where the boundaries are when it comes to abuse of council staff. And then you can restart the meeting when everyone's on the same footing with a great understanding. And I think that would allay any of those things in the future. Having conversations with people ahead of time is great.
Having said that, though, there's a difference, though, isn't there, between being highly critical of staff members and abuse. Do you call what Storm McVeigh was doing abuse?
There were allegations of corruption, things that in another setting might be defamatory. And I think that when those things happen and when they're allowed to play out, it has knock-on impacts. And we've seen time and time again when either members of the public or elected members say things publicly, they put things up on their social media. It has a real world impact. I talked to one staff member who had been setting a planting thing up by the side of the river. She'd been in her council work van. She'd got out to put some plants along the side of the river for a community planting event. And some guy turned up, saw her there by the side of the road, stopped his car, stood outside it, and started abusing and berating her for not being out fixing potholes. That's not on, and that comes from people allowing this kind of stuff to happen, misinformation to happen, and abuse of staff.
But there's a difference though, surely between criticising staff and abusing staff. I mean, you can't really correlate the two together and say, criticism is part of democracy.
Criticism, absolutely. And we are all completely accountable for our actions in the roles that we undertake. That's absolutely true. I expect criticism. I don't expect abuse, harassment, all of those kind of things. But when people lie and they misinform, when someone comes out there and says that staff are corrupt and all of those kind of things, it enables and emboldens others to act in real life.
Let's turn. Did you want to respond to that, Phil, or are we happy to move on?
Yeah, move on, please. I'm happy with you.
All
But
right.
I honestly cannot remember the person saying that staff was corrupt. What we've got to do is you've got to be careful, because we can go out there and anyone can. We've got to be careful as councillors that we don't rubbish staff. And to be honest, I said the same thing. I might have. What did I say? Staff are running amok. This was on Park Terrace. I said that in the paper, and I. I'm sorry that I said that, because you've got to remember, staff can't protect themselves. It's already very well for us to roll around all over the place thinking we're clever and go, but staff can't answer back. And it happens sometimes at council meetings. Some councillors get a little bit close to the edge on some of the questions they ask staff, and sometimes it's like the Spanish Inquisition, and I do feel sorry for staff sometimes with all the questions that they get, but I don't think anyone's doing it with malice or anything like that. But we've got to be careful that, like, staff are helpless as far as that's concerned, because they can't answer back to us, and that's not.
Having said that, though, they are accountable, but they're not elected.
They're accountable to the elected council.
We rely a lot on the advice we get from staff, and they do one hell of a lot of work to give us that advice, and we've got to look at that advice and make the decisions going forward. I must say, one thing that has happened over the last couple of years, 3 years, the quality of the reports that we're getting from staff is far, far better than we ever got in the past.
I agree with you there, and they're easier to read, even for a dummy like me who will read them at 1 o'clock in the morning with no life.
Dummy like me.
I digress. Let's talk about endorsements now. I know that both of you will probably say it's not important, but others would argue it is, because people want to know who is supporting who when it comes to this election. By the way, thank you for those who are asking questions too. Sarah, I'll start with you. What city councillor has endorsed you for mayor?
I haven't asked for any endorsements. It's the mayor's role to work with whoever the community decide that they should work with around the table. And that's what I'm planning on doing. I'm planning on making sure that every councillor who's elected gets to use their skills the best around the council table for the best interests of the city. And I think that's the way to go. I don't want just a working majority. I want everyone to be able to use their skills.
Well, that's an interesting point you make, because if the election goes one particular way, who knows what's going to happen? You may be faced with working with a minority administration, if you get what I'm saying. How would you cope with that, or how would you deal with that?
I don't think that's true. There's definitely a couple of councillors who are well and truly on the right who have expressed that they don't want to work with me, and that's up to them. I feel a bit disappointed for their residents. Many of whom will want their voice heard around the table in a more constructive way. But there are lots of people around the table who are just sitting in the centre. Some of whom have come up to me and said, I might have been on Team Phil last time, but I'm sure if you're elected, we'll work together really well. And I've helped a number of those councillors through this term with different issues they've had, ways to use process, and I know that I can work with them all.
Does it worry, though, the likes of when I asked people who would be able to work with you, and even Deputy Mayor Pauline Cotter, who's probably more aligned to your political views than perhaps Phil, refused to endorse you? I was surprised by that.
That's because, unlike some of the Team Phil campaign teams, so Councillors McDonald and Kewen, I've specifically said I don't want endorsements, and People's Choice are not endorsing. I don't have any working arrangement with any other councillors, no memorandums of understanding or anything, because I do want to work with everyone around the table. But
Duncan Webb did endorse you on this program.
Oh, that was great. There's a lot of individuals throughout the city who have backed me. I've got nominators. I've got over 220 people have signed up online to volunteer. There's been over 70 people out delivering leaflets. 150 people have volunteered to have my face on their fence. I've had over 350 donations from people, individual donations, and it makes such a difference when you've got that amount of community support.
Phil, you have had endorsements, I think, from Victoria Henstock. No surprises, Aaron Kewen, Sam McDonald, I think possibly, gone out on the top of my head now, Mark from Hornby. What do you make of that? Do you think endorsements are important or not?
It all helps. I get flattered when people say that they're happy to work with me, but it's what I did last time in the paper, and I'll never do it again. In the last election, I put down these are people that Phil would be happy to work with, and that was not my best work by a bloody long shot. I can tell you that. So this time, I'm
Why do you
certainly
say that,
not
Phil?
doing. It's sort of said, this is this team versus that team. Not into that. I've learned a lot since then. Whatever if I get in as mayor, whatever the cards lay down in front of you, that's what you've got to work with, and we'll just see what happens.
Sarah,
Except
go
that
ahead.
doesn't line up. It doesn't line up with all of the statements that you've been making and that your colleagues have been making about you just needing one more vote around the table. And that seems to be a much more parliamentary style rather than a really good local democracy style. So at Parliament, you get a working majority, you push through whatever you want. We've seen what's been happening in Wellington with all the cuts. And you keep talking about one more vote. Aaron and Sam keep talking about one more vote. And that's what that sounds like. It sounds like a team, and it sounds like an A and a B team.
There's a lot of things that I would have liked to have got done as a council that we haven't got done by one vote. And we've even sat there and after the vote has been done, and you say, oh yeah, not you. Some councillors said, oh, if you guys had one more vote, you would have got that through. Ha ha ha. So but you work with what you get, and just keep going. One of the good things that Leanne, the previous mayor, said to me, if you go into a meeting and you don't get what you want, don't dwell on it, because there's another problem coming around the corner, and you'll spend a lot of time and effort worrying about what could have been. You just get on with the next thing, because it's pretty fast and frantic up front.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people want to know, though, is that what is it that you will do with that one more vote? What is it that you would have done differently this term if you'd had just one more vote? What things would you have pushed through? What things would you have postponed? And what things would you have cut if you'd just had that one more vote?
I think the easiest thing for people to do is to look at that app that I think Aaron's put up called How They Voted, and you can see it, and it might not be issues that people follow, but they can see, oh, I like that issue. How did they vote? And that's the easiest way to see. And a lot of times, and you can say that the ones that have been put up there, I think there's about 20 of them, they are down to more or less one or two vote loss one way or another. And there's a number of things that could have been done a lot better, like wasting. Sorry,
they're mostly small fry though. And there were decisions out of we made
frustrating small fry. There's a lot. Here, right. I'll give you a classic example. Here we've got the speed hump on Cranford Street. Right now, we were told by council staff that Sam asked the question, how much money do we spend on speed humps in the city? And we were told between $100,000 and $200,000. And I'd start scratching my head and go, this can't be right. This is overall the whole city. And then I was told, it might have come out of different budgets. So I said to staff, right, take the one on Cranford Street. From the idea that was in someone's head to put that there to the finished article, how much was that? It was $248,000. Now, I wouldn't have put, if we'd had one more vote, that wouldn't be there. So it's things like there's $248,000 saved that we can put somewhere else.
Okay. So what about SOMO? So this area between Morehouse and Brougham Street that we put up, everyone voted in favour of it when we notified Plan Change 14. The residents' associations were in favour because it would take the pressure off our suburban centres for intensification. It would put it where it belongs, close to the central city. That vote failed when I put it up. the end of the Plan Change 14 process, and it was a tied vote. And that meant that we have more intensification going in our suburbs, even though the Business Association and the residents wanted that to pass. And I'm trying to wonder why you voted that way.
In that case, as you know, we're all trying to get 20,000 people living within the 4AVs by 2030, I think, somewhere in that. And the figures we got the other day, which are actually lower than I thought. I thought we were knocking around 10 or 11, but we're just over 9,200 or whatever in the central city. We haven't even filled the bit up in the middle of town yet. But the bit about SOMO is that got put forward along with the stuff on Papanui Road, and I think back that if they'd been done separately, things would have been a bit different. But the other thing is that area down there between Morehouse and Brum is a very good area for fairly cheap, cost-efficient businesses to be at. Because they're close to town, it doesn't cost them a lot of money to actually rent their building in comparison. And if someone's been banging away on a piece of steel as a panel beater for 20 years, and all of a sudden someone moves in next door and says, "Oh, you can't do this noise here." So that's why I voted against it, because we haven't actually filled up the middle of town, which has still got a long way to go.
Oh, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what that proposal was, though. There were all sorts of noise protections in there. It would have been part of the central city noise change that we're going on at the moment, Plan Change 21. And what it does is it creates, just like we had the deputation with Wells Street today, it creates another really cool mixed-use area close to the centre city. The actual result isn't anything to do with the central city. It's to do with our suburbs and more intensification in our suburban centres when it should be close to the city centre.
Need to move on because we're running out of time and it's going faster than what I expected. But Phil, I want to ask you this question first. Can you give me an example where you voted for something that you knew may go against public opinion? Or do you stand by everything that you've made, every decision you've made?
Yeah. Oh, not off the top of the head. I'm sure there's a couple of things around that if someone brought it up, I go, "Oh, yeah, I did vote that way." But generally, I vote for what's good for Christchurch. Okay.
What about derelict buildings in New Brighton?
Pardon me?
Extending the trials for derelict buildings in New Brighton. So we put up a proposal for making sure that we could trial new processes, the ones that have been really successful in town, to deal with some of those derelict buildings in New Brighton in that mall space. And you were the only one to vote against that.
Yep, because it's worked in the middle of town, but I was the only one to vote against it, but it still went ahead.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter.
Democracy.
Absolutely.
That's right.
I'm just.
Sarah, can you give me an example?
You don't win anything.
Sarah, well, that's true. Sarah, can you give me an example where you voted for something that you knew perhaps would go against public opinion?
Yeah, that was that speed hump the other day, and colleagues made a big meal of it on social media, and I knew that would happen. But people were completely misinformed about it. It wasn't a speed bump. It was a raised platform to help residents from one residential area and their rest home to get to the Mitre 10 to the Columbus cafe there and into the mall. Cars didn't need to slow down. That was in the report. It was even in your article that you wrote. People characterised it as a speed bump. I voted against removing it.
Okay.
I knew it would
Phil,
go ahead.
Let's discuss speed bumps, I suppose. Sarah, to you on this, I mean, Phil has suggested that he wants to try and stop community boards from voting on speed bumps. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, is simply because that these are decisions that affect not just one area of a community, but a city, city-wide, I suppose, if you like. Now, speed bumps does appear, for better or worse, to be a contentious issue. What do you make of Phil's thoughts on this?
I mean, it's one of those ones like central government at the moment, right? Everyone's in favour of localism until they're in power. And that's what's happening here. So, we're seeing time and time again people taking decisions away from our local communities. And I'm just not in favour of that. Our local community boards are the ones that are closest to our communities. They're the ones who hear the calls from our neighbourhoods about wanting to be able to slow down those people who are rat running in our communities. Everyone wants a slower, quieter street to live on, but they all want a quicker commute. So we need to remember that we are guests in other people's neighbourhoods when we're driving through. There's a big difference between the little neighbourhood speed humps, which which people are talking about, and the larger raised platforms at intersections. I think they're two different things. We need to treat them differently. But, I'm about localism, about local community boards, about training them well, giving them good resources, good information, and making decisions on behalf of their communities.
Phil, that a fair comment, given the fact that there's been several examples I think I've reported on where one of the community boards went against public sentiment for not wanting raised platforms or traffic calming measures, whatever you call them. And this is where I guess we're at a stalemate over this. Is that what you're meaning, that the community boards have too much power?
Oh, no. Community boards haven't got too much power. One thing, I'll just before I get on to speed humps, I would, after COVID, we had a whole lot of better off funding, and we gave all the community boards 500 grand to spend over 3 years, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. And they got a lot of stuff done because they're on the coalface, just like community boards should be. And I'd like to, going forward, maybe make it 100 grand more than what they get, because they know if they want a rubbish tin there or something, and they can sort all that stuff out before it comes to council. But getting back to the speed humps, we've got one community board. We'll take the likes of Dean's Ave. Dean's Ave's got a speed hump on one side and not one on the other. All of a sudden we're hearing that, maybe we don't need to put speed humps in because we can get this this grippy surface that might that helps cars slow down if they see someone crossing the road, and it makes it they know they're coming up to somewhere that might be a bit dangerous. But what I'd like to see is, instead of community boards making the decisions on just those things, nothing else, what they do, everything else they do is fantastic, and it affects the whole city, it might as well come to council, and the whole council decides whether that happens. Now, take the likes of, I won't go much longer, take the likes of Morehouse Ave. We had one the other day. You go to Morehouse Ave and you go and turn left into Madras Street. There's a slip lane there. A raised platform, speed hump, if you call it, is there. Perfect place for it. Absolutely wonderful, because people were ripping around the corner and could have taken someone out. And it's where a whole lot of pedestrians are maybe going to will cross once the stadium's up and running. So in those places, they're fantastic. But there's other places I can still struggle about why we've got a speed hump on the uphill side of the Dyers Pass Road roundabout heading away from the intersection. I can't believe we even had enough brains to put that in.
Sarah, did you want to respond to that? Do we need the speed bump there? I'm not actually quite sure what you mean, but anyway.
Oh, yeah, going uphill there. I mean, that was a community board decision, and the community board gets held accountable for that, just like council gets held accountable for its decisions on things. That's what local democracy is about, instead of centralising power. Any time you don't like something, just like central government are doing at the moment.
On that note, Sarah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I read somewhere you wanted more council committees. How would that speed up council processes, and why would you be in favour of that? Because I think, Phil, you cut them back and you gave councillors delegated kind of roles and what they were interested in. Is that how it works?
Yes, and I must say, Sarah's doing the climate portfolio, Andre's doing the in-town
entertainment stuff.
That's the word I'm looking for. And Tyler is doing the multicultural one. Fantastic work. They're right on it. It's really good. Some of the other ones didn't really get many reports in, I must say, but those three have been doing a fantastic job.
Sarah?
Yeah. Portfolios are one thing, and it's great that I've got some mandate to look into an area that I'm really passionate about, but there's no teeth with it. There's no budget. There's no decision-making powers. There's not even a staff member that would help me write a report. So all of those things don't come with the portfolio setup. When it comes to committees,
what kind of decision-making? Sorry to interrupt. What kind of decision-making powers would you like for your portfolio?
No, I don't think the portfolios should have decision-making. I don't think any one councillor or a mayor should be able to make decisions on the behalf of whole council. One of the issues that we came up with in the long-term plan, and it happened again in the annual plan, was that we had so many amendments and questions that councillors put up. It got to be completely unwieldy for the organisation. And that was because there was a lack of understanding about the programs of work that were happening within the organisation. So there were many of them on transport, because people didn't have ongoing insights into what was happening within the transport area within council. They didn't know the difference between the different types of projects that were happening, where the budgets were, where the individual line items were. And so we got this huge number of amendments put up and a huge amount of work for staff. Even our staff have said in a report that came to council last year that they would prefer that committees were back and reinstated. At the moment, the Mayor it was in the report, and the Office of the Auditor General, who did an assessment on the work that we were doing on climate, said that portfolio is problematic. One of the things it does is it says that, oh, look, Sarah's doing climate. It's over there. I don't need to worry about it. All councillors should be climate councillors. All councillors should be all over the multicultural stuff. The disability sector deserves more than just one councillor interested in what they're doing. And we need committees to be able to do that. Committees can do a whole pile of the grunt work for a long-term plan and be able to put forward stuff. One of the problems with previous committees is that they've been committees of the willing. So it's only been people who've been really passionate about the community space who've been on the community committee. What we need is committees that are more representative of the whole council, so that they're interrogating things more before they come to council, so that we don't get the relitigation that used to happen.
Does more council committees, though, possibly mean slower processes at council and more bureaucracy and more paperwork, though?
I don't think so. And in fact, I think we're really outliers nationally when it comes to committees. And there have been, for example, Wellington last term didn't have committees, it had portfolios only. They had to change. There was an independent review into what was happening at Wellington. It was very clear that the portfolio system wasn't working, and they reinstated committees.
One thing, Chris, we have had this in this cranium is we've had probably less council meetings with smaller agendas, but we've got a lot more done. We've got through a lot of work. When I was first as just a councillor, we were having a meeting every week and a half. There was a meeting. We actually dropped one out altogether, so that there's not as many full council meetings anymore, and we are certainly getting through the work.
Yeah, one of the reasons, of course, we've got fewer decisions happening at the moment is that we're mostly over the rebuild. And so, there were 2 or 3 terms there at council that were incredibly busy with a huge amount of work to be done. And that's mostly done now. So, of course, we've got fewer of those, but we don't have that oversight, which is why people keep saying, oh, I don't know what's happening here. Or why didn't I know this beforehand? So,
Sarah, do you think, you've talked a lot about staff. Do you sometimes think staff are biased in their approach?
Staff do the job that they're being paid to do. If we have a transport expert or a heritage expert, they've been employed for a specific role, and they've been employed with their expertise. And we set the direction. We say, could you go off and do this piece of work for us via our strategic priorities, all of that kind of stuff. When they come to us, they come as the experts in their field. We can choose to agree or disagree with that. That's fine. And we take into account public sentiment. I don't think they're biased. I think they're doing the job that they've been asked to do.
The reason why I ask is following the Dean's AV decision, a staff member or a spokesperson was quoted as saying, staff do not worry about some options they don't believe will get across the line. So I just wonder whether that kind of comment shows some kind of level of predetermination.
I guess there's a balance to get when you are a staff member at council. And we've seen this, councillors around the table say, why did you bother bringing us? There was no way that was ever going to pass. Council reports can't ever canvass every option that is ever open to council. There has to be a line drawn, and that goes through the executive leadership team, and that decision's being made there.
Okay.
But Chris, because there's so much consternation about speed humps, that's the main thing. As I say, I'm more than happy. Everything else community boards do, get those things that people are not happy with, and get them brought into full council. So then we're all in the spotlight making a decision, rather than a community board making a decision for the whole traffic flow of the city. Buses.
Yeah, I went to visit the Kevin Hickman Retirement Village. Lovely bunch of people, had a really good time, had a wee chat to them, and one of the first questions I got asked by that group of older residents was, can you put a speed pump in on Stedman Road? Because we can't cross the road. Traffic comes around that corner really, really quickly, and then they plant boot. Now, if that goes to the community board with the Harewood, Waimari and Pendleton councillors and community board members on it get to make the decision about whether there's a speed hump there or not. What we probably don't want is the councillor for Linwood and Cashmere and Heathcote making that decision instead. It should be up to that local community board who knows that community, who knows the area, to do that on those small local streets.
Mm-hmm. And I don't disagree, because the other day, and I've actually voted for a speed hump, believe it or not. This is in Strickland Street, right up by under the moon or under the water. There's a bar there. It's bloody good, actually. We put speed humps there to make sure that the traffic carried on the main drag rather than shooting down the side street, and so we put some there, and I'm sure they'll be good.
No, the speed hump decision was made by the community board. Council were just doing the sign off on the cycle lanes there.
That's right. But I saw them there, and I didn't crack on about it because I knew I couldn't, but I thought there's a good place for them because it's the right place. Putting raised platforms in streets like, say, Heaton Street, where there's a traffic light pedestrian crossing, I can't understand it. It's a pedestrian. If the traffic lights go on red, the people should stop and let the people across the pedestrian crossing. But putting a bump there, where there's a bump there every day between 4 o'clock in the afternoon when school finishes and 9 o'clock in the morning when school starts, I can't see the sense in it. It's just congesting traffic.
I just want to move on because we're running out. I just want to move on because we're running out of time. But and we haven't even got to cycleways yet. But in June, Council's own annual planned feedback showed there was a specific service that submitters most often said they could do without. Sarah, do you know what that was?
No. Cycleways. I haven't boned up on this one, sorry. But they also said they liked it. It was like kind of even on both sides, right?
No.
No?
No.
You tell me the figures then.
Well, in June, Council's own annual plan feedback showed the service that submitters most often, they call it a service, I wouldn't call it a service, but it is what it is. It's sort of infrastructure, isn't it? Said they could do without was cycleways. That was on the top of the line. Does that surprise you?
Yes and no. So it goes against most of the other work that we've done. So previous long-term plans, it's been one of the most positively submitted things on that we've done. But it is really controversial. It is really divisive at the moment because there are people out there trying to make it that way. And that's really sad for our city. We are due to grow by 32,000 people in the next 10 years. We've already got the country's slowest commute. Our traffic has increased. The number of cars on our roads has increased by 65% since 2001. If we don't do something differently, we will grind to a halt in just a few years' time. We need to make sure that we enable people to travel safely in different modes so that people who do need to drive can get to where they want to go easily.
Okay, I want to move on to climate change just briefly. I mean, as we know, Council declared a climate emergency in 2019. At the time, you were the chair of the Climate Change Working Group, and you described the declaration as a call to action.
Nope, I wasn't.
You were part of that declaration, though?
I was just one of the council members. That was the committee that Vicky Buck chaired, and the whole council voted on that. Yeah.
If elected mayor, would you commit to refraining from international air travel as part of your personal efforts to address climate change?
So that's going to be one of the toughest things as mayor. So I haven't flown for anything apart from work for the last 6 or 7 years now. No holidays, no sort of jet setting off to Fiji or wherever to relax. I have stayed in the South Island. So there have been a few work trips. The mayor's role is different, so you do need to represent the city, and I would find that something that I needed to do, but I would offset in the meantime. As you know, I'm personally committed to making sure my own personal footprint is low, but I'm also committed to doing the role of mayor really well.
So you wouldn't, or you would rule out international air travel in a bid to do your part for climate change?
I'm on my own absolute personal, absolutely. So I haven't done any, but I need to do the role of mayor, and that means doing the travel that I need to do for mayor. But then I would personally pay to offset that.
Nothing wrong with going to Fiji. I've just got back from Cairns. You should go.
I know.
Flights are cheap.
Work, right?
Jetstar. Well, yep. Yeah, actually, it was for work. It wasn't a holiday, I've got to say. You're right to point that out, and sadly it was. I wish it was a holiday. Phil, do you believe the council has done enough to deliver meaningful action on climate change, or has it fallen short?
we've done a lot. We got the climate change emergency. We've put in 300 hectares of solar panels out at the airport. Well, we're working with a Chinese company to put those in. That is good. We've got wastewater treatment plant, which is now moving to activated sludge, which is down at the wastewater treatment plant, which is our highest emitter of greenhouse gases. It's going to chop it off by just over 50%, from what I'm told. We're changing all of our ECAN are not allowed to buy any buses after end of next year that aren't electric, which it's got its problems of its own because they're heavy and they're giving the roads a bit of a hurry up. We've got all of our, as much as we can, all of our Parks and Rec stuff in-house with electric mowers wherever we can. So we're not sitting on our hands and doing nothing. We are leading by example, so to speak. But I've got 2 electric cars, which I actually thoroughly enjoy. But as I say, we're doing the mahi. We're doing the work, and we'll get there sometime, but it's not happening fast. Because the other way of looking at it is there's more people moving into Christchurch, and there's more people in cars. If we can make it, and I'm very pleased that we've got a thing called Mainland Rail that is going to start bringing event trains up from Dunedin, but they're also looking at bringing trains in from Rolleston and Rangiora and bringing them into the centre of town right by the Columbia Street overbridge by the railway line. If that gives 5%, 10% of people, won't suit everyone, but if 10% of people go on that instead of a car or a bus or a bike or whatever, it's just giving people more modes to. Every mode doesn't suit everyone. I probably won't use a bike to commute to work, but I'll use a car, or I might use a train if I'm going down to an event in Dunedin or something like that. But
nothing wrong with it. You should get yourself an electric bike. I should eat my words because I still haven't got an electric bike.
No, it's not an electric bike.
Well,
maybe one bike. What has he got, like a motorbike or something? I can meet you on a motorbike. Anyway,
it only does 70 kilometers.
We're nearly out of time. We're nearly out of time, but I just want to a couple of final things about Christchurch's identity. Sarah, you often use the word Ototahi instead of Christchurch, and I was wondering, do you believe it is time to officially change the city's name?
No, I use them interchangeably, and mostly I use them together, Ototahi Christchurch, and that's really common now.
Phil, would you like Christchurch's name to change?
I still use. It depends where I am. If I write it in my speech, I'll use it. If it's not in my speech, it depends how I've written it and what I've done. But generally, I just use Christchurch. Generally, I just use New Zealand. So it's just the way I am. Probably a bit older.
Okay, and a couple of final things to note. I think there was a Christchurch Star poll that showed pretty strong support for celebrating Canterbury's 175th anniversary, yet the council initially said it would not support this milestone. Phil, did the council misread the room? Because you were supportive of it, weren't you?
Yeah, they did. They did misread it, and I'm very lucky. I went along to the do at the tannery, and it was outstanding. And I now find out that my ancestors were on the 5th ship that came in, not the first 4. So all the stuff. They say, your family. Oh, I didn't know half of what's going on here. So. It was well worth it. We didn't put a lot of money towards it, but it was well worth it, and it had to be celebrated.
Sarah, do you think we should be celebrating 175 years of Canterbury anniversary?
Yeah, I think we should be celebrating a whole range of anniversaries, including that one. The reality is that, councillors set the budget for the events and festivals type funding, and then they give staff the guidelines on how to divvy up that funding. And staff get put in a really, tough position where they get oversubscribed. More people apply for a range of different events, and staff go along with the policy that's been set by council.
Because what we've got, Chris, what we've got is the likes of Rata, who are doing an absolutely fantastic job. Their focus has changed to different areas, which has left, we'll say, some people out in the cold, and they come to us. An ever-increasing amount of people come to us for the same amount of money, and staff are doing a bloody good job sorting it out. I don't envy them at all.
Just some final questions. When the election is over and the results are known, Phil, I know your biggest supporter is Chrissy. She'll be standing there whatever happens on election day. Sarah, who's your biggest supporter?
Oh, my kids. You know, I've got, you know, two 18-year-olds and a 20-year-old. They're just fantastic human beings and incredibly supportive. And I'll be with them and my parents and my wider campaign team on the day. Really looking forward to the results.
Did your kids ever say to you, Mum, don't stand for mayor? Why would you do it?
No, it's interesting. Back in 2016, they said, don't stand for council, we'll never see you again. But, you know, actually, no, one of them's on my campaign team and they've been incredibly supportive. Yeah.
And Phil, I know, so Chrissy will be there for you on the day of the announcement, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And she's your biggest supporter?
I absolutely best asset. she's looks after me all the time. But it's funny, I'm the oldest of my two other brothers and sisters, and they say to me, Phil, have you got rocks in your head? You could be doing so many other things, but I do it because I enjoy it. If I wasn't enjoying it, I wouldn't do it. So that's what it's all about.
And finally, look into your crystal balls the next year, and maybe, Sarah, you might have a pink one there. Phil, actually, Phil, somebody said it looks like you're on the toilet, but I can assure the people watching that you're not on the toilet. Sorry about that. So we don't want that, do we? What was I going to ask? I've lost my train of thought now after that joke.
Yeah, funny that, yeah.
What do you reckon is going to happen to the election result? Sarah, what do you reckon? Look into the crystal ball. What's your hope? Go on.
Sorry, this election, or you said a year's time?
Did I? No, sorry. No. I meant your election, the one you're in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting enormous community support. And I think that the grassroots community stuff hasn't been done for a really long time in Christchurch. And I think that there'll be some people who are really surprised at the result. And I can see me coming through and winning.
There we go. And Phil, to you. What's the election result going to be?
Of course, as I say, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't want to do it, because it is, and Sarah knows this as well, how many meetings we go to and forums we go to. It's actually one after another. I enjoy it, and I'd be very disappointed if I didn't get through with the amount of effort that myself, Chrissy, and everyone and all my team have done. Because it's a team thing. You couldn't do it by yourself. If it was just Sarah by herself or just me by myself, you wouldn't stand a chance. So it's the team behind you that gets you across the line.
Well, I think both of you, and I've said to you before, Sarah, I mean, your calendar always looks so busy, and I get exhausted after a meeting and just have to have a lie down. So, and the same with you, Phil. So I don't know how you do it, but I think it's a real contest, and I thank you both for your time tonight. A spirited and decent and respectful conversation, and I wish both of you all the best.
Thanks so much, Chris.
See you, Sarah.